speaker is Dr. Sangeeta Wagh, who heads the Wagh Eye Clinic from Pune, and she is going to talk on peripheral ulcerative keratitis, Moehrens ulcer. On to you, doctor. Can you share?
Yeah. Am I visible?
Yes.
I'll just go to. So there was just one point I wanted to make from the last talk. Very often, like it was said that the systemic disease is burnt out, like the joints, typically in a case of rheumatoid arthritis where the joints are deformed and the patient comes with an acute, with an ulcer or a melt. The guideline that I use to convince the rheumatologist is you do the ESR and CRP and they're definitely going to be raised. And that's how you convince them that there is activity and the need for systemic treatment. Thank you, Dr. Chitra, for this opportunity to speak on Moehrens. I've prepared it more like a PG lecture. So briefly reviewing the literature, Moehrens ulcer was described long back, initially by Bowman, and later it was described by Mackenzie, but it was finally named after Moehrens because of the publication of the cases, large number of cases of this very rare disorder. And it was again reaffirmed by Nettleship. Further. So this is a idiopathic, rapidly progressive, painful ulceration of the peripheral cornea that starts and spreads circumferentially and eventually centrally can involve the entire cornea. It could be unilateral or bilateral. And what is important, what differentiates this from the PUK, peripheral ulcerative keratitis, is the absence of any demonstrable systemic disease. This is more common in the tropics, in Africa, India, and China. And ironically, it was first described in the West. The triggering factors are not really known. There is an altered corneal associated antigen that is the trigger for the autoimmune response that starts out. Helminths, tuberculosis, hepatitis C, HZV, and zoster have been incriminated. Innocuous trauma can also set off the cascade of the immune pathology. Genetic predisposition in the form of HLA, DR, 17DQ2 have been described by Taylor et al. Accumulation of peripheral of polymorphonuclear leukocytes around the limbus were described by Foster long back, and the site of the pathology is limbus and beyond. So when you look at the conjunctiva in a patient of Moehrens, you'll find it is thickened and there is a limbitis, and very often when you need to operate or do a peritomy, you'll find it is necrotic. So we know that the primary site of the pathology is the limbus, from where the autoimmune response starts out. The T helper cells are seen to be in much more population than the T suppressor cells, and there is a very high enzymatic activity occurring in the limbus and the conjunctiva. So there is an antigen mimicry where these infections kind of alter the corneal antigen, which is the one that triggers the antigen antibody complexes to be deposited in the adjacent conjunctiva. It sets off an immune response, lysis, and destruction. The complement activation can occur through either the classical or the alternative pathway. Chemotaxis, migration of cytokines, enzymatic activity, collagenases, proteases cause destruction, and eventually the ulceration occurs. So it's a painful, relentless ulceration, and it progresses quite rapidly. There are 3 different varieties that are described. The anterior 1/3 to the up to 2/3 of the stroma is involved with steep overhanging edges. The limbus is involved, unlike in PUK, where you have a lucid interval between the limbus and the ulceration. The advancing edge shows infiltration, and associated complications could be iritis, secondary glaucoma, cataract, and up to 40% show perforation. So there are 3 different types of Moehrens that are described based on anterior segment fluorescent angiography, where you have the unilateral Moehrens, where there is non-perfusion in the superficial plexus, but there is leakage in the superficial as well as the deep. These are more likely the elderly patients. Bilateral aggressive is seen in the younger patients. It's painful, more rapidly progressive, and there's circumferential leakage that is seen. Bilateral indolent is seen in the middle-aged and is more progressive. There is no vascular leakage, and it is the vasculature is more or less normal. Another classification, it depends on the laterality. A unilateral type, which is common amongst the elderly groups, and you have a rapidly progressive bilateral that has been described more in Asia and in Africa. Clinical grading will depend on the circumference. This is described by Namrata Sharma et al. So basically, you see stromal infiltrates, which start in the peripheral limbus, and they will eventually coalesce. Like this lady, a middle-aged, my daughter's school teacher, came, her right eye looking like this, and the left eye almost 3/4 of the cornea. You can see this overhanging edge. You can see this thickened roll of conjunctiva. And here it is seen very well like a speed breaker hump where the whole activity of the disease pathology takes place. Once it is healed, you will see that there's peripheral vascularization and opacification. The differential diagnosis would be an infectious marginal ulcer, like was described by the previous two speakers. Terrien's marginal degeneration and marginal keratitis also need to be kept in mind. Terriens, you'll see this infiltration with vascularization. Young males could be bilateral. Infective pathology, like Dr. Praveen mentioned, when you look at this necrotic tissue, angry congested eye, one needs to rule out a secondary infection, and you could look for either a viral etiology, fungal, or pythium have all been known to mimic a PUK. An autoimmune PUK, you see that the limbus is spared. You have this lucid interval, and this could be unilateral, but more often bilateral, and a systemic cause would be found. The investigations have already been covered, and it'd be the same to rule out a PUK. A step ladder algorithm for treatment. In our armamentarium, we have topical steroids, conjunctival resection, systemic immunosuppression, any additional therapy, rehabilitation. So this is the only ulcer. It was a very famous postgraduate viva question, which is the only ulcer in which you will start steroids. So it has to be Moorens. So starting topical steroids very frequently, 1 hourly, and then taper according to the response. If there is no response to the steroids, you need to take this patient up for surgery to conjunctival resection, application of glue. In patients who are bilateral, again not responding, you go on to systemic immunosuppression and additional surgery to prevent loss of the eye, saving the eye, and eventually rehabilitation in patients who have got a bilateral ulcer. So topical steroids, you could start prednisolone acetate half hourly to half hourly and taper it over months, keeping a watch on the intraocular pressure. Systemic steroids, pulsed oral, or even IV methylprednisolone. You do conjunctival resection, as I'll show you later on.
Ma'am, 1 minute remaining.
Topical oh dear, I need to rush. Topical cyclosporin can be added. Here, I'll just show briefly, I'll just show 2 videos. Here you do a peritomy. Make sure you do a keratectomy and remove all the necrotic tissue. Apply glue and a bandage contact lens. Some disaster site saving would even involve 360 degrees. So I think the systemic therapy has already been covered, and I'll just skip it. The only thing I want to highlight is methotrexate is the most commonly used drug, and even as ophthalmologists, we can safely prescribe it. You can go right up to 25 milligrams per week. Lamellar grafts can be done. And so here this patient has already perforated. In spite of systemic therapy, you do a keratectomy. And what I prefer to do is prepare a stencil, and then you cut out the tissue from the donor and transplant it in place. So, you know, here I've put it on top of the perforated iris, but eventually it will scar off, and this is the end result. I think what Donald Tan has described is the match and patch, where you measure the extent with 2 different tree fines, and you cut out an identical patch from the donor tissue and place it to get a good outcome. In patients where you just have an island of tissue, you can do a limbus to limbus DALC and prevent loss of this tissue and rehabilitate it for a future possible penetrating keratoplasty or a keratoprosthesis. So we need to remember that Moorens is a sight-threatening disorder which can affect young and old. timely diagnosis and appropriate intervention can save the eye. And even though it is a rare ulcer, it's not as infrequent, and it is very relevant to our day-to-day practice, and one needs to keep a watch and treat it appropriately. Thank you for your attention.
That was a very nice talk. I wish we had more time to hear all of it. Basic question. When would you do conjunctival resection? Would you wait for severe thinning to happen? Or while the active inflammation is there, you would take it up? At what the point of time?
So if the patient doesn't show adequate response to topical steroids, or if there is significant thinning going deeper than 70%, and clinically I see a roll of conjunctiva that is thickened, I know that I must go in and resect this conjunctiva, going 2 clock hours on either side of the visible infiltration, and apply the tissue adhesive to prevent any further thinning. So I would act immediately, especially if it's a young patient, bilateral. I would rather secure sooner than later.
But for the graft, like a tectonic graft, would you want the inflammation to subside before you do a graft?
Yes. So this was just the initial therapy, that is the keratectomy and the peritomy. To do a graft, I would definitely immunosuppress, get the eye quiet, and then do a tectonic graft. In the event of a perforation or like a central island, I would do it right there and then, rather than losing the eye to perforation. But to do a vision restorative corneal transplant, I would definitely wait till the eye is quiet and immunosuppress.
Dr. Praveen?
Yeah, no, one question, because traditionally, Dr. Sangeeta, I think lovely talk. Traditionally, textbooks tell all of us that Murren's ulcer are very unlikely to perforate, and you don't see perforations very frequently. So, I mean, what would you say about that statement? Obviously, you showed a lot of cases that already had a perforation. You spoke about it. I mean, how true is that, and how would you use that to actually confirm a diagnosis of Murren's?
The literature describes that up to 35 to 40% patients are known to perforate. And unfortunately, these are the young ones who come with a very aggressive form and bilateral, and some of them continue to melt and perforate despite systemic immunosuppression. So, when you're looking at a rapidly progressive ulcer and a likely perforation, I would treat very aggressively, systemic as well as locally in the timely surgical intervention.
Dr. Merle, would you add something to this?
Yeah, I just want to add 2 points. One being the fact that, the reason why we do the resection and the TABCL is because we would like the conjunctival vasculature actually brings in all the immune mediators, and we want to have a barrier there and remove that conjunctiva from the cornea, which is what's causing the destruction. So often we do this, even if there is a minimal amount of thinning, or you notice that there is an overhanging edge, and you proceed with doing that. The extent, I'm sure that Sangeeta didn't have time to tell that, but it's usually 2 clock hours beyond the region of ulceration, and a 4 millimeter wide strip is what we usually excise. But what's more important, I think, is the fact that we tend to give immunosuppression whenever we plan for any kind of surgical intervention in these patients. So we give them a shot of IV methylprednisolone, that may be a single dose or 3 doses, and then we switch them on to systemic immunosuppression so that, they don't tend to melt further because of the intervention per se.
Oh, good. That answered my question. Dr. Praveen,
one point to add.
Yeah.
Just a small point. Instead of using the tissue glue, you can also use multi-layered AMG. That will give tectonic support also to some extent, and it won't be irritating to the eye. That will give a smooth healing also.
So one thing is that even if the cornea is not so thinned out, the role of a barrier is not just tectonic support there. The role of barrier is to prevent those immune complexes which are getting deposited into corneal stroma. So even if my cornea is not thinned out so much, I don't mind using either glue or amniotic membrane there. That's purely to prevent those immune complex to enter from either conjunctival vasculature or from the tears and more so when the inflammation is more, through tears also, many of them pour in, and the exposed stroma, it's very easy for it to go and melt the stroma. So when the epithelial layer is intact, the stromal melting is unlikely. And similarly, if you artificially create a barrier in the stroma, towards the stroma, the melting process stops.
Good. Dr. Praveen, any other question before we go on to the next speaker?
No, I think all are related. So I think we should actually go on to the next talk, and then maybe we can have some